back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. I've been following my next guest's work for a long time, especially because, as most of you know, I have a special interest in social insurance, Social Security, Medicare, and those issues, and her work is very important in that area. Kathleen Romig is Director of Social Security and Disability Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities that can be found at cbpp.org. Our main areas of focus are Social Security, supplemental security income, paid leave, and other budget issues close to our heart. And recently she wrote actually several pieces that I thought were important, but the one that triggered my invitation to her was entitled Raising Social Security's Retirement Age Would Cut Benefits for All New Retirees. I wanted to talk to her about that and related issues. So without any further ado, Kathleen Romig, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you, although obviously the circumstances at hand, perhaps less than delightful. It seems that however unpopular the idea of Social Security cuts is with the American people, and however great the need among many Social Security recipients, various sort of, you don't have to agree with my presentation of it, Kathleen, but various angles. It's presented and packaged in different ways. That's the way I see it. Well, we're not really cutting, we're changing the inflation rate, or we're not really cutting, we're XYZ. And one of those popular ways, I think, to introduce what is a de facto cut, as your essay points out, is they say, well, we're not really cutting the benefit, we're just raising the age when you get it. But that is a benefit cut, isn't it?
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything you said. And I appreciate that you read the whole title of the paper, because that's the main point that we want to get across. It is 100% a cut. And this is something that many people don't understand. When they hear retirement age, they think it is a change in eligibility for benefits. And it's not. You can still receive benefits at the same time, but every single person will get a lower benefit. Every single new retiree will get a lower benefit, no matter when they claim benefits, if we raise the full retirement age. And that's the important thing that a lot of people don't understand. And I think that politicians take advantage of this misunderstanding that, for example, at President Biden's State of the Union, the very Republicans who were screaming at him that he was lying when they said that he proposed Social Security cuts have signed on to the Republican Study Committee Social Security proposal that would raise the retirement age to 70.
And I think that a lot of people, let's clear up some misconceptions, Kathleen Romig, because it's so important. Number one misconception I think that the Republicans play on is, and other opponents of, or other proponents of Social Security cuts is probably the way to put it. One of the misconceptions they play on, first of all, people think the retirement age for Social Security is 65, but it's not, is it? It's at this point, even if no changes are made, the full retirement age is 67, correct?
Exactly. That's correct. Yes.
So we're talking about a change that was made in the 1980s, I guess, and raising the age to 67. And that, in effect, if I read your work correctly, that raising of the age to 67, in effect, cut benefits by 13% already from what they would have been. Is that, well, explain to us how that works, because, I think a lot of people understand that whatever the retirement age, some people can retire early at 62 and they don't get their full benefit, but they get some of it. Some people might retire at 67 and get their full benefit. Some might wait till 70 and then they get a little more than their full benefit. But I think people don't really understand that whole full benefit concept and how it's calculated and what it means for them. Can you help us?
Exactly. It's a very confusing concept for people. So the as you said, as of last year, Social Security's full retirement age for new retirement beneficiaries is 67. And what that means is that a worker can get their full benefit at age 67, but they can claim earlier. So you could go and claim at 62, but you would get a lower benefit. Your benefit would be reduced. Your monthly benefit would be reduced by 30%. And that reduction is permanent. So every month until, well, you die, you get a 30% reduced monthly benefit. And that's something a lot of people don't understand. They think perhaps they get a smaller benefit between 62 and 67, and then it goes up at 67, but it's a lifetime reduction. And at the same time, if you wait until age 70, you can get a 24% bonus called a delayed retirement credit. And again, that's permanent. That permanently increases your monthly benefit. And so one thing that people don't understand about this is they think, well, if I waited until age 67 instead of 65, which is the traditional full retirement age in Social Security, well, then couldn't I get the same benefit? And that's true on a monthly basis, that you could get your full benefit at age 67 now, just as, previous generation could get a full benefit at age 65. But the thing is, you have given up 2 full years of Social Security payments. And so that is a cut in your lifetime benefits. And on an average lifetime basis, it amounts to precisely the same cut as if you had claimed at age 65.
So let me kind of step through a simplistic example, if you can bear with me, Kathleen Romig,
Sure.
Because again, it's so important. And I'll use just made up numbers for the sake of simplicity, obviously way off. But so the benefit, the total benefit that you're likely to receive, it's calculated with life expectancy and actuarial tables and all of that. So let's say the benefit is now 65. It begins at age 65. Let's say the actuarial tables say, and again, I'm making up numbers just for easy arithmetic, but let's just say they say, well, a 65-year-old is likely to live 20 years. And therefore, at this rate of pay, they'll get a total of $100,000. So if you wait, they kind of calculate, if you wait till 70 or whatever age, they kind of calculate that amount and divide it by fewer years, so it's a larger monthly check, but they expect you not to be collecting it for as long. And in reverse, if you retire early, it's a smaller monthly check because you'll be receiving that check for longer. If someone comes along, let's say Republican House committee, and successfully raises the age to 70, well, you've just taken away like 25, and again, these are totally made up numbers, 1/4 of that life expectancy. So all the checks are going to be, regardless of when you retire, are going to be that much smaller. Is that more or less, forgetting the numbers, which are way off? That's how it works, right?
That's more or less how it works. Exactly. That, so it's what people don't understand about these ages is it's really just a sliding scale. You get, the smallest possible benefit at age 62, and then the largest possible monthly benefit at age 70. And it's a sliding scale, but the scale is such, just as you described, the scale was calculated to account for the average life expectancy, so that whether you claim at 62, 63 and a half, 67, whatever, that you would get the same amount of lifetime benefits, irrespective of that claim age, assuming that you live an average number of years. So that's exactly how it's set up now. And what raising the full retirement age would do is really accelerate those cuts, so that at any given age, any month or year of your claim, you would get, if the age was 70, for example, you would get a 20% lower monthly benefit.
So there's no way around it that when people talk about, they're basically, I feel when people talk about raising the age limit as if it's not a benefit cut, that they're almost like those people you used to see on the street with the 3-card Monty or the cup and ball trick. It's kind of like they're trying to distract you from the fact that no matter when you retire or how long you live, if they raise the retirement age, you and most Americans will at some point become a Social Security beneficiary. You will get less money. They're talking about giving you less money. There's no other way to interpret it, right?
Exactly. And that's why it saves so much money, because it's a benefit cut.
Right. And let's talk about that saving money part of it a little bit too, because this is something that I think there's a lot of scare talk about, Kathleen Romig, and I think that, again, a lot of misinformation, a lot of misrepresentation. I don't think our media is very good at catching this and explaining to people what it really means. Let's talk, for example, about these scary charts that some so-called nonpartisan groups like to throw around, and others, talking about how much we pay out to Social Security. It looks like this huge number, right? Where, they'll put a pie chart on it and they'll say, look at this slice that's Social Security. Look how much federal spending it is. But number one, and I'm not going to get into alternative economics or, any of those other theories, from the practical point of view of the way Social Security works, all of that money you see in that slice that they show you on those scary charts has been paid for and is being paid for by payroll taxes that were specifically created for Social Security, right? So it's not like, oh, this is something that just popped up on the budget like a new airline or a jetliner or something. This has been funded separately, and again, economic theory, you can argue that, but people have seen a chunk taken out of their paycheck for this tax. That's what this money is for, and currently there's a surplus. I mean, we can talk about that in a minute, but the fact is that if you show the costs associated with Social Security without showing the tax revenues dedicated to Social Security, you're pulling another fast one, aren't you?
Exactly. And the truth is, Social Security legally cannot pay a dime more than what's in its trust funds. And so you're right. Every single dollar of those benefits that the program has ever paid has always been fully paid for through the Social Security trust funds, which are primarily financed through the dedicated payroll tax and also through taxation of Social Security benefits and interest on those big trust fund reserves that have built up over the past few decades.
So let's talk about that trust fund a little bit, Kathleen, because there again, we hear a lot of scare rhetoric. And you wrote something recently about the trust fund, about the 2023 trustees report, among other things. You also wrote, I think this was last March, Social Security is not bankrupt, quote unquote. This bankruptcy talk really annoys me. And I'll tell you why. Because let's say I have annual expenses of $50,000 to stay alive. And let's say I've been making $48,000 a year, and in a couple of years, and paying the rest out of savings accounts. In a couple of years, the savings account will be gone. Well, I'm not bankrupt. I've still got $48,000. Number one, I've still got $48,000 coming in.
Exactly.
So, bankrupt, insolvent. These words, it seems to me, they're scare words and they're dishonest.
Exactly. No, and I think the contrast is really important, that the same people who are really exaggerating the problems, the financial problems that Social Security faces, are obscuring the fact that that raising the full retirement age would be a significant benefit cut. And when you look at both of those sides of the equation with more precision, then you see they're actually not that much different at all. As I said, Social Security legally can't pay more than what's in its trust funds. And because those reserves are expected to be depleted in about a decade, if Congress doesn't take action, then Social Security would be forced to pay out 24% less than has been promised to beneficiaries. So that's a 24% across the board benefit cut. It's not bankruptcy, but it's not good either. And so what the irony of the conversation about raising the full retirement age is, the proponents of doing that say, well, to avoid this scary benefit cut, and it is scary, it would be terrible if that came to pass. In order to avoid this benefit cut, this across the board benefit cut, which we would do anything to avoid, we are instead proposing an across the board benefit cut that amounts to 20% of benefits. They're doing the very thing that they're purporting to try to avoid. It just doesn't make any sense once you understand the numbers.
Well, exactly. And I was going to bring that up because looking at your analysis of raising the benefit age, that's nearly 20%. The bad thing that they're talking about, if nothing is done, by the way, we can talk about the fact that things can be done.
Of course.
But even if nothing were done, a benefit cut across the board of 23, 24% in 10 years, their solution to that is, okay, let's cut 20% now.
It doesn't make any sense.
And they want you to think, that they're being responsible. I think
exactly. And it looks that way if you understand these myths. If you believe these myths, if you think that Social Security truly is going bankrupt and that you'll never see a dime of it, which many, many young people believe falsely, they believe these scare tactics. If you believe that, and if you don't understand that raising the retirement age is a substantial benefit cut, then yes, perhaps it does look like a good deal. But if you understand that they're saying to avoid this scary 24% benefit cut, we instead propose a 20% across the board benefit cut from which there is no escape that affects all new retirees. Well, then it doesn't look like such a good deal after all.
Well, I always, Kathleen Romig, I always think of the old Mission Impossible TV show from the 60s, where if they wanted to rob a bank vault, they would make it look as if the bank vault was already empty.
Exactly.
Then people go in, leave it open, and then you could, this is what they're doing. They're saying that there's nothing left when there is something left. And your point is so well taken about young people. If there was one thing I could, wish I could communicate, it's to young people that they're being misled here. I have a friend who's an economics professor, and she says she'll ask her classes, undergraduate classes, how many people think Social Security won't be there for them. And most of them raise their hands. So this is the pretending the safe is empty. It's very disturbing. Let's talk a little bit about what could be done. Since obviously, a 23, 24% cut in 10 years isn't a good thing either.
No.
And we both know that compared to other developed countries, our Social Security benefits are, well, I would call them, you use the same word, I think, paltry. People don't have much in their retirement accounts. Social Security benefits we were told they were supposed to be part of a three-legged stool that included corporate pension plans, employer pension plans, which have really largely evaporated. Americans haven't been able to save. The benefits in Social Security are already not strong. So what can be done to address these, exaggerated but nevertheless legitimate concerns about what happens 10 years from now?
Yeah. So, when you're looking at a financing gap, there are two fundamental ways to address it. One is spending less, and one is taking in more. And the 1983 Commission, the last time that Congress addressed Social Security's financing, was really more on the benefit cut side of things. And so when I say spending less for Social Security, that really can only mean benefit cuts. That's the only way to spend less. 99.5% of Social Security's income goes toward benefits. So that's the only way that you can reduce Social Security's spending. So that's one side of the coin. That's very, very, very unpopular, not just among Democratic voters, but among Republican voters too. When you poll people, when you ask them, would you rather get less in Social Security or pay more? Overwhelmingly, voters of both parties say they would rather pay more than get less. So it's really important that policymakers also look at the income side of the equation, and that's taxes. And so, there are, of course, traditional ways to do it. We have a payroll tax now, and we could change the payroll tax rate by a little bit. Say if we raised it by 1%, so you contributed 1% more of your earnings every year to Social Security. For an average worker earning $50,000 a year, that would mean $10 more out of each biweekly paycheck, matched by $10 from his or her employer. And that would close 25% of the gap. Raising the cap is the most popular solvency option. And that would also address a really significant problem with Social Security, which is that rising inequality has really undermined Social Security's tax base. Let
me stop you for a second, because I want to talk a little bit more about raising the cap. But before we do, I also want to get into the question of, and you may know more about this than me, about the idea of, let's say, another 1% being paid out of people's paychecks. The latest survey I saw on that was done quite a while ago. It was from the National Academy of Social Insurance about 10 years ago, I think 2012, 2013. And they asked voters across the political horizon, would you be for or against that kind of increase? A few dollars more a paycheck in return for greater Social Security benefits when you collect them. The overwhelming response, I don't remember the figures now because it's been a decade, but was favorable. And I don't know if that survey's ever been repeated. I'd like to see it be repeated.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that before we even get into whether the wealthy are paying their fair share and so on, it seems to me that that's something people would absolutely be willing to do.
Yeah. And I think because people know where it's going, they understand that their Social Security benefits are based on their contributions. They understand that Social Security faces a financing problem, and they're willing to be part of the solution. And so I think that should be on the table. And unfortunately, policymakers, members of Congress from both parties have backed away from talking about tax increases, particularly on workers who are making less than $400,000. But I think that if you talk to people themselves, like you said, they actually are willing to contribute more to strengthen the Social Security program because it's that important to them.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And in terms of the cap, most of our listeners will know what it is, but for those who don't know, the tax that funds Social Security is subject to a cap, a maximum amount that's taxed. So several people, I was one of them, did a calculation. I did a calculation one year on when Jeff Bezos reaches his Social Security cap, which I think now is about $115,000 a year.
Oh yeah, $160,200.
$116,200. Okay, so I was off by roughly a percentage point, but and I calculated he reaches it in 8 seconds, and someone else suggested 12 seconds. And obviously that's an extreme case. But as you mentioned, as wealth inequality and as income inequality increases, more and more of our income is escaping this tax. More and more people are making money from passive income, from investments and so on, which is not subject to this tax. If I recall correctly, the original intent in the 1983 reforms was to capture about 90%.
Yeah, in 1983, that's right.
And it's now what, 80%?
83%, yeah. And so it's a big difference. It's huge, exactly. If the cap continued to cover 90% of all wages in the economy, it would be $300,000 this year. And so that's a huge difference. We're talking about 7% of income in the world's largest economy, or wages, I should say, 7% of wages not being taxed at all. That if they had simply just stayed at 90% of all wages, then we would be capturing taxes. If we had just done that alone, if in 1983 we had pegged the tax cap at 90%, we wouldn't even be having a conversation about Social Security's financing right now. That would have given us another 50 years of full financing from now. And so it's a really, really important part. We can still do it now. We'd have to do it gradually, but we could still do it now. And, interestingly, Medicare, which is also partially financed by payroll taxes, got rid of its cap altogether. There's just no cap on the Medicare payroll tax. And so there doesn't have to be a cap. It's not necessary. For Social Security, that traditionally the wages on which you pay tax is also the wages on which your benefits are calculated. So typically, that's the policy reason for the cap. So a lot of people think there should be a cap. But again, this is a policy choice. We can make different decisions now in the face of new information about the explosion of inequality over the last 40, 50 years.
Right, exactly. I was going to say that traditionally, also at least post-World War II, workers' wages rose along with corporate profits. And so with that tradition broken, we have to, seems like we have to respond accordingly. So there are multiple solutions afoot in that area. One is taxing above, raising the cap. Another is reimposing the cap at $250,000 or $400,000 a year. Another is to apply this tax to investment income and other
exactly
things.
And Medicare, does that. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, but Medicare does that too. Not only is there no cap, but there's an additional payroll tax that higher income households pay toward Medicare. So their Medicare tax totals 3.8%. And then in addition, there's a net investment income tax that matches that 3.8% of this, like you said, passive income, net investment income. And that too is intended to strengthen Medicare's financing overall. So there's also a precedent for looking at the types of compensation that the Jeff Bezoses of the world and other people, the really fantastically wealthy people, most of their income is not coming in their paycheck. Most of their income is coming from their investment income.
Right. And I can't help but point out that since working people's wages determine the revenue to Social Security, when people call for the Fed to suppress wages or drive somewhat higher unemployment, they're often the same people who express a sort of, crocodile tears over Social Security's finances, but they don't say, but wait, that will, reduce the income to Social Security Trust Fund if we suppress wages or increase unemployment. So people don't somehow think holistically about this. So obviously we have solutions, and those solutions can be revenue driven, and they can allow us, as I understand it, to increase benefits where they need to be increased as well. So there's no reason to approach that. But Kathleen, Romig, before I let you go, the other issue that I wanted to touch on, at least just briefly, is, and you've written about this as well, is this Social Security's administrative budget.
Yes, thank you for raising that.
Yeah, it's so important because here we have a situation where more people are entering the Social Security system and retiring because of the baby boom age wage, and about which there's been some alarmism, but it should be noted that we've known for a long time. The baby boom ended in 1964, so we've known since 1964 how many baby boomers will retire roughly. One, and two, the 1983 reforms factored that in, and baby boomers paid more, and are getting less benefit as a stratagem. Nonetheless, as more people enter the system, primarily Republicans have insisted on cuts to the Social Security Administration budget, even though that budget comes from, as I understand it, from Social Security's funds and not from general revenue. So they're not, quote unquote, reducing the deficit, their stated goal. They're just making it harder to access Social Security with phone wait times, office wait times, and offices not close by and everything. And I wonder if that isn't the real goal.
Well, it's interesting because, like you said, all of the money used to administer the Social Security program comes out of the Social Security Trust Fund, comes out of those dedicated revenues. And like I said before, that's only 0.5% of this massive program. And, you can't get anything like that kind of overhead on the private market. It's an extraordinarily efficient, lean operation, but really too much so. That Social Security's staffing was down 25% from its peak last year. And that's even as 1 million baby boomers are retiring every year. That's even as the agency has been needing to deal with the extraordinary circumstances of serving the public through COVID. And so I think the the lowest level in 25 years, not down 25%. So Social Security Administration staffing is down to the lowest level in 25 years. That doesn't make any sense at a time where we're having the number of beneficiaries peak to all-time highs. And what that means is that people are not able to access their earned benefits. And that is such a tragedy. That is a backdoor benefit cut. And it's particularly difficult for people with disabilities who are applying for Social Security disability insurance, because it's much more complicated process to go through a disability determination than simply to prove that you are age eligible for retirement benefits. So people are just waiting scandalously long to find out if they qualify for Social Security disability benefits. And in the meantime, I mean, the stories just will break your heart. Their homes are being foreclosed upon, their marriages are falling apart, people die, people commit suicide. I mean, it's just the human cost of this is just horrific. And it is a way that reduces access to these earned benefits.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought us back, kind of as a point of conclusion to the human dimension of this, because at the end of the day, Kathleen, it seems to me that that's what this is all about. We deal in numbers, we deal in policies, but at the end of the day, underlying all of this is a kind of inhumanity. Mm-hmm. And humanity to me is so profound that when a disabled person dies waiting mm-hmm. to get their benefits, there's a frame of mind that calls that a win. Mm-hmm. That's how off we are. And we haven't even gotten into why it is that they don't want, for example, that I think some people players in this because the federal government owes money to the Social Security Trust Fund in the form of various bonds. Mm-hmm. They don't want to pay it back, and they rather pursue tax cuts or whatever. I think it's really, we don't say man's inhumanity to man, but mm-hmm. human beings' inhumanity to their fellow humans is behind this too. So, that's my closing thought. If you had anything you wanted to say in closing to add to that, that would be great.
No, I agree. And I think Social Security itself is just an example of exactly the opposite of that. It's an example of all of us pooling together our resources to take care of each other. As we get older, if we become disabled, if we lose a family breadwinner, it's a way that we do take care of each other. It's really, really, really important to people. It's important to their incomes. It's important to their feelings of well-being, to reducing their anxiety about these really awful situations sometimes that people can face. And I think it's just so worth saving. And I'm so glad that, people like you are out there fighting for the program. It's so important to people.
Well, likewise, you do terrific work. And again, my guest has been Kathleen Romig. Kathleen is the Director of Social Security and Disability Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Their website is cbpp.org. Kathleen, thanks so much for all your good work, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks. It's delightful.
And we'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.